Ngozi adjusted the neckline of her bespoke aso oke and allowed a slow, predatory smile to touch her lips. Tomorrow she would be marrying Chidi, the scion of the Osakwe family, whose wealth was only surpassed by his complete lack of interest in her past. He saw her as a beautiful, polished trophy. He was correct on the first count. Her fingers danced over the stack of last-minute, custom-designed wedding invitations, not for distant aunts, but for 4 very specific men. These were the ghosts of her romantic history, the men who had collectively humiliated, underestimated, and wounded her over the last decade. There was Iki, the brilliant academic, Tunde, the arrogant, wealthy charmer, Emeka, the jealous but connected brute, and Bode, the calculating entrepreneur who had called her an investment with poor returns. She had planned this day for 2 years. Chidi's wedding was the ultimate stage, and the audience would be her chosen exes, seated front and center. She imagined their faces, a mixture of disbelief, envy, and simmering rage. Ngozi didn't want closure. She wanted chaos. She needed the fire they would inevitably bring to burn down the entire meticulously constructed facade of her life, but not before it served her ultimate purpose. She had a goal, a very large one, and their public self-destruction was the necessary fuse. She carefully sealed the final envelope, addressed to Bode, and slipped it to her security detail. The grand deception was now fully underway.
In his cramped, book-lined flat in Surulere, Ike, the man Ngozi had left for being too stable, smoothed the thick, imported cardstock. The invitation felt like a physical blow. Ngozi was getting married, and she wanted him to watch. Ike was the quiet, introspective type, usually immune to grand gestures, but this felt intentionally cruel. He remembered the last time he saw her, the cool finality in her eyes when she said his future was too small for her ambition. Now she was marrying a man with an empire. His initial instinct was to burn the card, but a deeper, more academic curiosity took hold. Why invite them all? Was this some elaborate psychological experiment? He decided to attend, not to object, but to observe her downfall, which he believed was inevitable given her volatility. Across town, at his Banana Island penthouse, Tunde, the most overtly arrogant of the exes, laughed as he showed the invitation to his current flavor of the month. "The queen needs her jesters for the final performance," he scoffed, flashing a diamond-encrusted watch. Tunde had dumped Ngozi, thinking she wasn't worldly enough for his social orbit, only to watch her climb faster than he could. The invitation was an insult, a gauntlet thrown. He viewed it as a chance to remind her, and Chidi, exactly what she had given up. Tunde resolved to be the best-dressed, most effortlessly charming man there, ready to whisper a scandalous, perfectly timed secret if the opportunity arose. He began composing a subtle, venomous text message for the bride-to-be.
Emeka, the ex-bodyguard who had once tracked Ngozi's phone activity, received his invitation while running drills with his security team. The sight of the gold-embossed font sent a jolt of possessive rage through him. Ngozi was his, always had been, and this marriage was a betrayal of a future he had already mapped out. He had warned her about ambitious men like Chidi, men who hid weak spines behind expensive suits. Emeka's loyalty was fierce, if misguided, and he saw the invitation not as a taunt, but as a silent cry for help, a distress signal. She must be trapped, forced into this union. He immediately started making calls, not to sabotage the wedding, but to organize a last-minute extraction plan, convinced he needed to save her from a fate worse than his company. Bode, The stingy ex, who always calculated risks and rewards, spent an hour studying the invitation's weight and paper quality, noting the absurd cost. Bode knew Ngozi better than any of them. He understood her transactional nature. She never did anything without a motive. Inviting 4 volatile exes to her most important day wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy. He theorized she was trying to secure a better wedding gift, create drama for attention, or make Chitty jealous. Bode smiled, recognizing the familiar gleam of ambition. He decided to play her game, and he would play it better. He booked a ticket to Abuja, mentally calculating a wedding gift that was outwardly spectacular, yet secretly worthless, a perfect symbol of their shared past. His only uncertainty was how Ngozi planned to profit from the guaranteed disaster.
Ngozi retreated to the quiet sanctuary of her apartment study, which her friends believed was reserved for calligraphy and meditation. In reality, it was where she kept her true documents. She opened a sleek, biometric-locked journal and began typing a final entry. Tunde is predictable. His ego guarantees he will act. Ike will react to the predictable action. Emeka is the wild card. His loyalty, though misplaced, makes him dangerous, but his need for validation makes him manageable. Bode is the only one who sees the game, but he is too arrogant to believe he won't win. She reread the entry, ensuring the camera hidden within the lamp was still recording her hands. The core of her plan hinged on a document Chidi had signed, a complex prenup that awarded her nothing if she initiated the divorce. The only way out with the settlement intact was if the Osekwe family, for reasons of profound public scandal, voided the marriage themselves. Project Nullification, she typed, her fingers steady. She knew the Osekwe family's true weakness wasn't public disgrace, but the exposure of the questionable origin of their vast fortune, a secret Chidi's father, the senator, guarded obsessively. She had hinted at this secret to Emeka months ago, knowing his possessiveness would lead him to investigate. Ngozi concluded her entry. I need them to do what they do best, fight each other, and in the fallout, accidentally expose the truth they never knew they were protecting. The camera runs tomorrow.
The Exes, each arriving in Abuja on Friday afternoon, coincidentally ended up at the same exclusive Transcorp Hilton lobby. Ike was attempting to check in quietly when he spotted Tunde, draped in a cream linen suit, receiving a flamboyant welcome from the hotel staff. Tunde, ever the performer, paused dramatically and offered a sarcastic salute. "Look who crawled out of the library," Tunde drawled, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Ike offered a clipped, dismissive nod and attempted to ignore the wave of hostility. Their rivalry had always been one of intellect versus ostentation. The tension escalated when Emeka strode in, his massive frame dominating the entrance. Seeing Tunde, he immediately recalled the rumor that Tunde had tried to poach one of Ngozi's business clients years ago. Emeka's face darkened, and he started walking toward Tunde, his fists clenching. Bode, who had observed the entire exchange from the discreet distance of the bar, chuckled silently into his glass of imported whiskey. This was exactly the kind of predictable, ego-driven behavior Ngozi had anticipated, and it confirmed his belief that she was orchestrating something theatrical. Bode knew he had to separate himself from the ensuing drama to maintain the vantage point. He called Ike over, offering him a drink, a silent pact between the two most calculating men present. They would watch the others tear each other apart for Ngozi's amusement.
The rehearsal dinner on Friday night was a small, intimate affair designed to introduce the core wedding parties. Chidi, blissfully unaware of the psychological minefield he'd created, insisted on introducing Ngozi's close friends to his conservative family. The Exes were seated at a round table, far from the head table, a viper's nest of simmering resentment. Ike maintained a stony silence, while Tunde engaged in a loud, performative conversation with the table next to them, constantly referencing his own spectacular achievements. Bode chose his moment perfectly. During a toast by Chidi's father, Bode subtly shifted his gaze to Ngozi and lifted his champagne glass, holding her eye contact a moment too long before taking a long, deliberate sip. The gesture was insignificant to Chidi's family, but screamed intimacy to Ngozi and the other exes. Emeka, watching this nonverbal communication, felt his blood pressure rise, convinced Bode was staking a claim. "Some people don't know when the show is over," Emeka muttered, loud enough for Tunde to hear. Tunde, seeing his chance, shot back, "Says the man who thinks his biggest asset is his forearm circumference." The quiet dinner table instantly fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence, and two of Chidi's aunts exchanged horrified glances. Ngozi, watching from the high table, smiled inwardly. The first domino had fallen. Later that evening, in the suite, Chidi, still basking in the glow of the dinner's superficial success, tried to reassure a visibly uneasy Ngozi. He completely misread the tension among the exes as simple, residual awkwardness. "My dearest, you are truly a mature woman," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "To invite all your history shows such grace. My mother was skeptical, but I told her, Ngozi is a modern woman, above petty rivalries. The past is the past." His blindness to the reality of the situation was astounding to Ngozi. He genuinely believed his wealth and status were so powerful that they neutralized any potential threat from her former flames. "They are just old friends, Chidi," Ngozi lied smoothly, her hand resting on his arm, a perfect image of soothing reassurance. "A wedding is about forgiveness and moving forward." She mentally noted his exact words, above petty rivalries. This conviction was his Achilles heel. He could not conceive that she would deliberately invite trouble. His confidence was the key ingredient in her recipe for disaster, ensuring he wouldn't tighten security or cancel the invitations. As he drifted off to sleep, Ngozi slipped out of bed, went to her safe, and retrieved a small encrypted thumb drive. She glanced at the recording light on her wall and whispered, "Tomorrow, the past won't be the past, my love. It will be a weapon." The next morning, the day of the wedding, Tunde cornered Ngozi briefly in a deserted corridor near the bridal suite, his smile dangerously tight. "You have balls, Ngozi," he hissed, grabbing her wrist gently but firmly. "What's the game? Trying to make Chidi think you're still desirable? Trying to make me regret leaving you?" His ego was clearly bruised, and he wanted a private acknowledgement of her lingering feelings. He believed he was the prize they all still desired. Ngozi looked him directly in the eye, her expression entirely neutral. "The game, Tunde, is the marriage. Nothing more, nothing less. I invited you all to show you that my life has moved on to a level you can only watch from the sidelines." She paused, then twisted the knife with surgical precision. "You especially, Tunde, need to learn that my history is now my strength, not my vulnerability." Tunde's eyes narrowed with fury. She had calculated that this exact dismissal would motivate him to act out during the reception, not just for revenge against her, but to assert dominance over the other exes. He released her wrist and stormed off, muttering about making a spectacle that would eclipse her white gown. Ngozi watched him go, then calmly checked the time on her watch. The countdown to chaos had officially begun, and Tunde was now her most valuable and willing saboteur. In his hotel room, Emeka paced like a caged lion, his extraction plan dissolving into panic. He had tried to corner Chidi's closest associate, attempting to dig up some dirt that would justify his rescue attempt, but found nothing concrete. His frustration peaked when Bode, ever the opportunist, sent a bottle of expensive champagne to his room with a cryptic note. "Relax. The show is about to start. Don't be the opening act." Bode's calculated smugness infuriated Emeka more than Tunde's open disdain. Meanwhile,
Bode was putting the finishing touches on his public gift, a large, ornately framed photograph. It was a picture of Ngozi and him from a trip to Zanzibar, but the frame was carved with the Osakwe family crest, stolen from an old family photograph. It was the perfect passive-aggressive bomb, a public display of affection and intimacy wrapped in a gesture of respect for her new family. The effect would be devastatingly subtle. Ike, however, was quietly utilizing the hotel's business center. He wasn't plotting a scene, but rather researching the Osakwe Group's recent corporate mergers, driven by his observer's curiosity to find the flaw in the foundation of Ngozi's new life. He wanted to understand the why of the entire spectacle. The four Exes, unknown to each other, were all activating their unique forms of disruption.
The wedding ceremony commenced at the opulent cathedral, a symphony of white lace, crystal chandeliers, and Lagos's high society. The Exes were seated, as requested, in a row reserved for special guests of the bride, a visible hostile pocket of energy near the altar. Ike was meticulously dressed, his face a mask of polite detachment. Tunde, the most visibly agitated, kept fidgeting with his cufflinks. Emeka sat stiffly, his eyes darting around the venue, searching for an opportunity to intercept Ngozi, while Bode looked utterly serene, a smile playing on his lips, waiting for the gift-giving opportunity. As Ngozi, stunning and radiant, began her slow walk down the aisle, the atmosphere in their row thickened. Tunde whispered venomously, "She looks expensive, but still cheap," prompting Emeka to shoot him a death glare. The collective presence of Ngozi's past was a palpable distraction, an electric hum in the otherwise sacred space. Chidi, standing at the altar, looked nervous but happy, occasionally glancing at his bride with adoration, never at the Exes. Ngozi, however, caught Bode's eye as she passed. He offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod of recognition, acknowledging the game. Ngozi's composure remained flawless. The tension was a testament to her planning, and the cameras of her professional wedding team, strategically placed by her, were capturing everything with perfect clarity. The exchange of vows began, the words ringing clearly through the cathedral sound system. When Chidi spoke, his voice was thick with genuine emotion, his commitment real. Ngozi's response was equally perfect, delivered with the conviction of a highly trained actress. As the priest reached the moment, "Is there anyone here who knows of any reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony?" The silence that followed was excruciatingly long. Tunde leaned forward, a sardonic, performative cough escaping his lips, a gesture that earned him a brutal kick under the pew from Emeka. The priest, sensing the deliberate disruption, cleared his throat and repeated the question, his gaze sweeping the room. Ike finally broke his silence, though not with a word, but a movement. He reached into his breast pocket and deliberately pulled out a small folded document, a photocopy of Ngozi's university transcript, which proved she'd lied about her graduation year. He held it loosely, clearly visible to Tunde and Bode, threatening to expose a minor but embarrassing deception. This was Ike's form of sabotage, intellectual blackmail. Ngozi's mother, observing the entire silent exchange, leaned over to her husband, whispering frantically. Ngozi, slipping on the wedding band, felt a surge of triumph. The men were now competing to ruin her, and that competition was exactly what she needed. The tension moved seamlessly from the solemnity of the church to the glittering, extravagant reception hall. The ambiance was pure Lagos society. Crystal, champagne fountains, and a live band playing smooth Afro jazz. Ngozi and Chidi made their grand entrance to a standing ovation, the picture of wedded bliss. The Exes were, again, prominently seated, but this time at different tables, allowing the friction to spread. Ikeli was with Chidi's quiet academic cousin,
Tunde was near the dance floor, flirting aggressively with a bridesmaid. Emeka was near the entrance, maintaining a watchful, protective stance. And Bode was near the head table, waiting for the designated gift presentation. Ngozi, noticing the simmering rivalry, took the microphone for an impromptu, unscripted moment. "Before we dance, I want to thank all my special guests," she announced, her voice honeyed. "Especially those men who shaped me into the woman I am today. Your presence means the world." She specifically locked eyes with the 4 Exes, her words dripping with a fake sincerity that only they recognized as a declaration of war. Her public acknowledgement served 2 critical purposes. It validated their importance, thus encouraging them to escalate their sabotage, and it firmly positioned them as the source of any impending scandal. The Osawakwe family members were now looking at the 4 men with intense, nervous scrutiny. The gift presentation session began, and Bode, as anticipated, was first to approach the head table. He carried his large, ornate, custom-framed gift. He stood before Chidi and Ngozi, his smile radiating warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "To Ngozi and Chidi," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the muted background music, "a gift of remembrance and hope. This is a favorite picture of Ngozi's, framed to honor the family she is joining." He placed the frame on the table, where the large picture of him and Ngozi in Zanzibar was now unmistakably adorned with the Osakwe crest, a blatant intrusion into Chidi's heritage. Chidi, oblivious, started to thank Bode profusely for the thoughtful gesture. But Chidi's father, the senator, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the crest's misuse. The other Exes immediately understood the implication. Bode was publicly claiming a deep, romantic history with Ngozi, suggesting she had already introduced him to the inner sanctum of the Osakwe family, the crest, long before the engagement. Tunde burst into performative laughter from his table. "Brilliant, Bode! A picture is worth 1,000 lies," he shouted. The laughter ceased instantly when Emeka, protective of Ngozi's honor despite his rage, hurled a small decorative bread roll across the room, hitting Tunde squarely on the back of the head. Chaos was bubbling to the surface, exactly on schedule.
The bread roll incident instantly fractured the decorum of the high society wedding. The security, Chidi's men, rushed toward Emeka and Tunde, creating a distraction near the dance floor. This was Aike's moment. Seeing the distraction, and already fueled by too many glasses of premium cognac, Aike seized the microphone from the head table, pushing the bewildered MC aside. His voice, usually scholarly and quiet, was now loud and slurred. "Attention! The bride thanks the men who made her. Let me tell you how Ngozi is made." The whole went silent. Aike, driven by his intellectual resentment, waved the photocopy of the transcript he had threatened with earlier. "She is built on a foundation of lies. She told Chidi she was the top of her class in '08, but she actually failed her final dissertation and only graduated in '09 because her father paid for a retake. She is a fraud," Aike screamed, throwing the transcript paper into the air. The small, white paper floated down over the dance floor. The Osakwe matriarch gasped audibly. This was a minor scandal, a personal failure, but it publicly exposed a fundamental lie to Chidi and his family. The wedding was now fully destabilized. Ngozi, standing next to a pale, speechless Chidi, felt a rush of satisfaction. Aike had successfully moved from intellectual sabotage to full-blown public defamation, creating the perfect emotional and legal precedent for a crisis.
Tunde, smarting from the bread roll to the head and Ike's dramatic performance, decided Ike's petty academic truth was too boring. He needed a grander scandal.
As Ike was being wrestled away by security, Tunde grabbed a champagne bottle, pointing it at the head table. "Forget the school, let's talk about the real investment," he roared, swaying slightly. "Bode here claimed Ngozi was his biggest loss. Well, she spent his money because she was spending mine right after. She bankrupted me, buying a car for her mother to show Chitty she was humble." Tunde's revelation was pure, ego-driven fabrication, designed to make Ngozi look like a professional gold digger who operated in layers. This was too much for Emeka. Hearing Tunde lie so brazenly about Ngozi's motives, even though the marriage itself enraged him, flipped his protective switch. He saw Tunde as the true villain, the man tarnishing her reputation. "Lies!" Emeka bellowed, charging from his table, knocking over 2 waiters and a floral centerpiece. He lunged at Tunde, tackling him to the ground. Champagne sprayed everywhere as the 2 men rolled, landing heavy, unrefined blows. Guests screamed, photographers scattered, and the entire wedding dissolved into a horrific upper-class brawl. Chitty, finally snapping out of his shock, lunged toward Ngozi, grabbing her arm. "What have you done?" he hissed, his face contorted in disbelief.
The security detail, overwhelmed by the high-profile brawl, struggled to pull Emeka and Tunde apart. Emeka, spitting blood and rage, was dragged backward, his eyes fixed on Chidi, whom he now saw as the ultimate cause of Ngozi's humiliation. In a final, desperate burst of fury, he screamed, aiming to hurt Chidi where it mattered most, his family's reputation. Emeka had done his own digging, just as Ngozi predicted, albeit accidentally uncovering the wrong secret. "Ask your father, Chidi," he yelled, the sound amplified by the sudden, stunned silence following the fight. "Ask him where the money for the Lekki Free Trade Zone land really came from. It wasn't the government contract. I saw the documents. Your wealth is built on stolen pension funds. The senator's entire fortune is a lie." The effect was instantaneous and far greater than the brawl. Chidi's father, the imposing senator who had remained frozen until now, visibly paled. He lunged forward, not at Emeka, but at his own security chief, screaming in a panicked, guttural voice to stop him! Get him out now! Chidi immediately released Ngozi's arm and ran to his father, trying to calm the explosive situation. The senator's reaction was not denial, but absolute, terrifying panic. The reaction of a powerful man whose biggest, most criminal secret had just been exposed in front of the entire elite of Abuja. Ngozi watched the chaos, her expression still perfectly composed, and finally pulled out her phone.
While the Osakwe family attempted to muzzle the senator and violently restrain Emeka, Ngozi stepped away from the head table, ignoring Chidi's frantic, desperate pleas. Her dress was slightly soiled with champagne, but her composure was absolute. She opened her phone and made a single brief call, speaking in a low, professional tone that none of the surrounding guests could comprehend. "The trigger point has been reached." Emeka revealed the original source, and the senator's reaction was recorded. "You have everything you need. Execute Phase 2. She hung up, placing the phone back into her clutch. She surveyed the damage. The 4 Exes were either bleeding, detained, or in Ike's case, quietly observing the scene with wide-eyed realization. The Osakwe family was in full meltdown, screaming threats and trying to shield the senator from the dozens of camera flashes now going off. The professional photographers and videographers Ngozi had hired, all planted associates, were meticulously capturing the senator's panicked admission and the ensuing fight. The plan had worked flawlessly. The men had competed to wound her, and in their collective, ego-driven spectacle, they had accidentally provided the legal and social leverage she needed. She took a deep breath, the smell of expensive perfume and spilt alcohol filling the air, and prepared for the final, astonishing act of her performance.
A moment later, a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the pandemonium. "The party is over." It was Ngozi's wedding planner, a petite woman named Ada, who now calmly stepped forward with a high-powered microphone. She wasn't holding a seating chart. She was holding a cease and desist order. Simultaneously, the chief photographer, a burly man, stepped onto a chair and projected a series of images onto the reception hall's massive video screens, which were initially intended for the wedding montage. The screens displayed perfectly clear, time-stamped photos. Tunde attacking Emeka, Ike throwing the forged document, and most critically, a short video clip of the senator's face contorting in panic as Emeka yelled about the pension funds. Ada, the wedding planner, read from her document. This wedding has been nullified by the bride, Ngozi Nnamdi, on the grounds of deliberate and material misrepresentation by the Osakwe family regarding their financial standing, constituting fraud, as openly confirmed by the involuntary on-record statements of the senator here present. The guests gasped as the twist became apparent. The wedding was not a ceremony. It was a brilliantly constructed trap to extract public and recorded evidence of a massive financial crime.
Ngozi finally retrieved the microphone from the shell-shocked MC and addressed the room. Her voice now crisp, clear, and devoid of any wedding day softness. She was no longer a bride. She was a predator who had finally caught her prey. "To my esteemed ex-boyfriends," she said, nodding coolly towards the detained and stunned men. "You all asked why I invited you. The answer is simple. You are the most predictable men I have ever known. Your collective insecurity, your need for public dominance, and your competitive arrogance made you the perfect unwitting tools." She turned her attention to the Osakwe family, who were now surrounded by her photography team, who were actually plainclothes financial investigators. "You, Chidi, and your father thought you were marrying a beautiful, ignorant girl to clean up your public image? You failed to realize that every single failure and humiliation I endured at the hands of these men," she gestured to the Exes, "made me a better strategist. I didn't need revenge on them, I needed their chaos. You needed the marriage to secure a political and financial pardon. I needed its public collapse to expose the criminal foundation of your wealth. What you all did to me tonight, you publicly provided the evidence I needed to nullify the prenup and collect my massive settlement for this fraudulent association. You have all served your purpose."
The wedding reception became a crime scene. Chidi was led away, dazed and disbelieving, by the security staff who were actually investigators. The senator was ushered out, furiously trying to silence the camera crew. The Exes, having played their part, were quietly released, each one realizing in horror that their attempt to ruin Ngozi had only paved the way for her incredible victory. Tunde looked defeated. Ike looked analytically horrified. Emeka, finally understanding his role as the accidental informant, looked utterly devastated. And Bodhi, the only one to grasp the scale of her genius, simply stared at Ngozi with a mixture of profound shock and reluctant admiration. Ngozi, untouched by the chaos, walked out of the hall and straight past the wreckage of her perfectly staged wedding. Her settlement, an agreed-upon contingency from the rival financial group that had hired her to expose the senator's crime, was waiting for her. She had engineered a highly public, recorded scandal, leveraging the predictable flaws of 4 men and the criminal panic of one family to legally and financially break free. She never wanted Chidi. She wanted his family's ruin and the payoff it guaranteed. Ngozi stepped into her waiting, unmarked car, her massive diamond ring now worthless, but her bank account substantially heavier. She smiled,
Not the fake bridal smile, but the real, satisfied grin of a woman who had finally turned her past into her most valuable asset. The Exes had socked her with a scandal, and she used the impact to launch herself into unimaginable wealth.